Here on the North Lawn with Jake Tapper, ABC's senior White House correspondent. And Jake, the people in the building behind us, very happy, I'm sure, about the Supreme Court upholding the president's health care law. But all the geniuses who told us the court was going to strike down the individual mandate now say, well, maybe this is not so good for Obama because he's saddled with an unpopular law.
Well, it is an unpopular law. It has barely over 50% disapproval, but it's still majority disapproval. Individual components of it are popular, so President Obama does talk about them, different pre-existing conditions and other things like that.
Wouldn't it have been worse if it had gone down and he had seemed to be wasted his first 2 years on something that was unconstitutional?
Yes, much worse. I think there's no. This was a win for the president. He's happy. I know conservatives and Republicans are trying to spin that. Well, now we have this issue to talk about. It's true. It's still not a popular law, but it's also true that Mitt Romney is still a very flawed carrier of the anti-Obamacare banner because he passed signed into law very, very similar law, including
in Massachusetts.
In Massachusetts, including one that contains the tax, the fine that Republicans are now talking so much about. This fine, if you can afford health insurance but you don't purchase it, you face this fine, which is the Supreme Court decided is a tax. And Republicans are hitting him for it. Well, Romney did the same thing.
Can't have a mandate without a penalty. What did you make of CNN and Fox News botching the story and initially reporting that the law had been struck down? And I guess even the president, watching TV,
the president,
thought that was
yeah,
the case.
he was outside the Oval Office. We're told by senior administration officials there was a flat screen TV and with split screen 4 channels, and 2 of them were reporting the news. And those 2 were the ones that got it wrong, and the sound wasn't on, but the chyron, the graphics said Supreme Court strikes it down.
Big embarrassment?
Look, it's embarrassing. We all make mistakes. I mean, I think that it's the pressure to be first with the news.
When if you took 2 more minutes, you could finish reading at least the key part of the decision and get it right. So that pressure to be first sometimes leads all of us astray.
Yeah, look, I mean, it happened with Gabby Giffords. NPR had a false report, an erroneous report that she had been killed. Thankfully, she was not. And other organizations, media organizations, went with it. It's actually something, I gave a kind of a critical review of this new HBO show, The Newsroom.
Aaron Sorkin.
But in the 4th episode, he captures this perfectly. The pressure to be first and the pressure to go with something when everyone's going with it. He specifically uses the Gabby Giffords incident, even if you're not 100% sure yourself. It's something he captured very well.
And that is risky business. What would you say is the biggest challenge covering the White House? On more than a couple of occasions, I have seen you and Press Secretary Jay Carney going at it in the briefing. Is it hard to wrestle information out of this administration?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to get information out of this administration. It's like other administrations. It's one of the things that's great about covering Congress. That was my previous beat.
They all want to talk.
They all want to talk, and they're all running around. You see them all the time, from the majority leader of the Senate to the Speaker of the House. They're all there, and you can grab them. You can wait for them. You can't do that here.
Yeah, you're in a very small cubicle.
Small space. Yeah, and there's lower press, and then there's upper press, and then that's it. You're cordoned off from the rest. You can't go speak to the spokespeople even for national security. They're in a different part of the building you can't talk to. So
how do you get around those obstacles?
You have to work sources. You have to, know that luckily I've been covering then Senator Obama, now President Obama, for half a decade on Capitol Hill and then the campaign. So I know a lot of these people. So I'm able to get them to return my calls sometimes, not always. You have to work sources. You have to work sources outside of this area, outside of the White House. The administration is big, something like 2 million people. Some of them want to talk, so you have to work them as well. But often it's just a question of finding the thing they don't want to talk to, getting away from the cameras and finding out what it's about, and then reporting it.
Interesting that covering the White House often involves covering people who have contact with the White House who are far away from this building. And finally, a huge amount of attention, Jake, to this article in The Atlantic by Anne Marie Slaughter, who left the State Department and said she just couldn't juggle the demands of a high-pressure job with the demands of motherhood. And this has sparked a debate, and obviously mothers carry most of the burden in these situations.
They do.
But dads do too, and you have 2 young children. And
I
how
do.
do you cope with the relentless demands of this job and being a dad?
It is true that I try to be there as much as I can. I'll do Good Morning America in the morning, and then at 7:15, 7:20, I'm back driving home so I can take my kids to school, spend some time with my kids, let my wife go take a shower. But it's also true that, first of all, we're blessed that we don't need 2 incomes. My income's enough for our family, so my wife can do some part-time work, but we don't need her full-time. And then second of all, she does most of the child rearing. I mean, I wish it were not so, but she does do most of it because I'm here. I'm working.
And with kids who are 4 and 2, that's a full-time job.
It's a very full-time job. If anyone who's had little kids knows, it can be a maddening job when you have to deal with 2-year-olds and 4-year-olds all day. But I mean, I read Anne Marie Slaughter's article. It was very interesting, and she's right. I mean, society still ultimately, even however evolved we are, and I consider myself a feminist, and I consider obviously my wife is a feminist, and you know, we still adhere to fairly traditional child rearing tasks, which is, generally speaking, she's in charge. I try to help out as much as I can. When I'm there on the weekends, I try to be there 100%, but the burden does fall on her, and I suspect even if we were a 2-income family, it would still be the same. It would still be the same. I think it's the exception, not the rule, that the mother is not the primary caregiver.
Well, Jake Tapper, thanks for joining us on this 100-degree day here at the White House.